Good evening, everyone. Another work week, another beginning of the week, and so back on here with y'all. First things first, hope everybody had a wonderful Easter weekend or Resurrection Sunday weekend, whichever one you call it. Hopefully everyone had a wonderful weekend, enjoyed with their families and loved ones. We got a little bad news on the world front on this morning. Poer Francis passed away of a stroke, they said. He had just had the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Vance, visit with him the other day, and possibly the last high public official he saw. And so it was kind of a shock that, the Pope didn't look good, not at all, but that, he had just saw the Vice President, and then the next day he passes away of a stroke, no less. So that's really sad, of course, for Christendom as a whole, even if you're not a Roman Catholic. And even, as a former Roman Catholic, that would have obviously been a big deal to me if I was still Roman Catholic, and it is a big deal to Roman Catholics. But it's a big deal to Christendom as a whole when a leader of probably the largest Christian denomination, Reformation, in the world dies. That's a big deal, irregardless if you agree with some of their teachings or not. That's irrelevant. We know Christendom as a whole is so separated and divided and fractured that we almost disagree on everything. We rarely agree on anything, but we disagree on just about everything these days. We're not unified in the least bit. But when the Pope passes away, that's a big deal, regardless if you're a Roman Catholic or not. That's a very big deal. That's a real big deal. Who knocked those over? Yeah, that's a real big deal. So now, of course, gotta get ready for the funeral. And gotta get ready for the funeral and the election of the new Pope. It's going to be real interesting to see who the next Pope is. I'm not necessarily for an Italian Pope, even though there hasn't been one in many decades. I could care less if the next Pope is Italian. I don't know why people even brought that up. To be perfectly honest, the next Pope should probably be somebody who represents the largest concentration of Catholics, and that's probably now either South America or Africa. And Pope Francis, of course, was South American. He was from Argentina, so that made a lot of sense. His predecessor was German. His predecessor was Polish. So we've had some different popes from different parts of the world, different countries. There's a couple of people in the running. I believe the Cardinal, I can't remember his name, out of New York, Catholic Cardinal out of New York. He's very popular. He would be a good choice. There's probably some Asian cardinal that are good choice. Definitely, I think I saw a couple of African cardinals I think would be a good choice, but not a European one. I think Europe, the Catholic population in Europe is small comparatively to South America and Africa, and possibly even the United States. in my opinion, the next cardinal shouldn't be an Italian or a European for that matter. It should be either somebody else from South America, Central or South America, possibly the United States or Africa. I think that's the way that the cardinals who are under 80, because if you're above 80, you can't vote. So the cardinals who are under 80 years old, that's what they should be looking at. They should be looking at who, one, best represents the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, one, and two, I think they should be looking at somebody that represents a large concentration of Catholics. And like I said, Christians in the United States and Europe are leaving. The Christian population in the United States and Europe is dwindling. But the Christians in other areas, if they're not growing, at least they're stable. So that's what they need to be looking at. More representation from those continents and countries where the Catholic faith is strong. Not just because the Catholic Church, was founded in Italy, so it should be another Italian. No, that back in the day, yeah, fine. But now, no, that's not even the way it should be. Unless they think that Italian cardinal is way overqualified and just super cardinal, But other than that, I think they should be much more open to getting somebody from, outside of Europe, honestly. Like I said, Pope Francis was good. He was from Argentina. South America has a large Roman Catholic population, so that made perfect sense to me. And so, I think that, I think that'll be a good job. But we'll see. Have the funeral first, and then after the funeral, then they'll elect a new pope. So it'll be quite interesting to see, who the next pope will be. I'm interested, and I'm not a Roman Catholic, but again, I used to be. So, I find stuff like that fascinating. I find stuff like that interesting, and again, it affects all Christendom. And really, the Pope affects more than just Christendom. There are other faiths that respect the Pope, so and they'll be at the funeral. And so I think the death of a Pope is a big deal, is a real big deal. Because of the influence that the Pope has, almost more influence than any other leader of any other Reformation or faith. The Pope is extremely influential, on par, if not more than some of the, our Muslim leaders of faith. Obviously, the Ayatollah is very influential, obviously, in Iran. But, I think the Pope, out of all the faiths, I think the Pope is probably the most influential. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fellow Christian. I'm saying that just because of his influence all over the world. And, he's not only is he the head of Roman Catholicism, but he's the head of his own country. He's a head of state, on top of being the head of Roman Catholicism. So he's a plus as the Pope, he's also considered royalty. So it's kind of a trifecta. So I think that I think it's it's a big deal. It's a real big deal. Again, you don't have to agree with Roman Catholicism, but when it comes to somebody who's influential in not only in Christendom but in all faiths, Pope was definitely on the top, in my opinion. And so, yeah, it's just kind of a sad deal, you know. I'm thinking he was wanting to advocate, and, you know, do a new election like his predecessor, Pope Benedict. But he didn't get the chance. I think I had heard that he had mentioned he was ready to advocate and just kind of let somebody else do it. But, you know, God saw otherwise and his health saw otherwise. And so, you know, praying obviously for the Roman Catholic Church that they find the right leader. The right leader that sticks to the gospel. Not that is worried about trends in the world and secular things, no. But that sticks to the word and to the gospel. That's what I'm hoping they get. But that's just me. So, yeah, that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. And so yeah, that's a big deal. So I just wanted to talk about that because, again, it was big news. And it was a shock and a surprise. I mean, we saw that he was not in great health, and he was starting to really swell up. So, but obviously nobody expected him to pass away. So that was a shock. And it does put into question, you know, what age do they want the next pope to be? Do they want him a little bit younger so he lives a long time, so he's able to, you know, lead the church for a while? Do you want somebody that's close to 80 who's got all the wisdom and experience, but probably is not going to last long? I don't know. That's up to the Cardinals. My thing is, you don't want somebody too young, but you don't want somebody close to 80 either. I think you want somebody, I would think you'd want to get a Cardinal if they're out there who's in their 60s. That's me. I would think you'd want a Cardinal that's in their 60s, that's still got, you know, it's got years of experience, but it's not so old that, you know, he's not going to last at least a decade, you know, depending on his health. You don't want some, I think 50s and younger are too young, in my opinion, to be the Pope. But I think that somebody in their 60s, I think would be good, especially if they've been a Cardinal a little while, or they've got a resume that you know, shows a lot of work, missionary work. You know, they've held all the positions. They've been that local priest. You know, they've been a bishop. They've been a cardinal. You know, they've come through the ranks. Might be a Jesuit, like Pope Francis was. You know, they got a good resume. I mean, you're trying to get somebody who's 50, you know, they might not have the experience. I mean, if they're a Cardinal at 50, you know, either they're a wonder kid or something, you know. So I'm thinking somebody in their 60s would be perfect. I think, you know, somebody who's been around the block, so to speak. And of course, who's well respected amongst his peers, because I know those elections, you know, could be contentious because there's politics. Unfortunately, there's politics involved. Just like there's politics in my Reformation involved when we're electing our presiding bishop. There's always politics involved. So, and you know, there's not only politics, but you know, people are trying to, you know, get people on their side and all this other stuff. So, you know, it's just like anything else in the world, unfortunately. You know, you're going to have your little groups and cliques and all that stuff. the gospel, who's not swayed by trends and what's going on in the secular world. Roman Catholicism don't need a leader like that. They need a leader that stands fast on the gospel. Period. Not to say they're not going to have opinions on all kinds of things, but their main focus needs to be the gospel. But being that they're also a head of state, they do kind of tend to delve into other things, but they need to stick to the gospel. And I understand the Roman Catholics have a different Bible than us Protestants do, but it's not that different. It's different, but it ain't that different. They add a few books, but for the most part, it's just, the Gospels, the Protestant Gospels in there, they just add a few books, and that's what makes up the Catholic Bible. They just need to stick to the gospel. Because even if you're not Roman Catholic, you look up to Christian leaders, especially if they're standing up for what's right. You can have a disagreement with people and still respect people. So, that's the way I look at it. And so it's kind of it's just kind of a big deal. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it all pans out. Obviously, it's going to be some weeks before the election happens. Like I said, they got to do the funeral. The funeral alone is going to be a humongous event. So, so we'll see how it all pans out. So I just wanted to mention that since that was a big breaking news event. That was a breaking news event. I thought about something as well. One of my old co-workers messaged me. It's been a while, but she reached out and messaged me just to check on me, which, she does every once in a blue moon, which is fine. I appreciate it. She's a rarity. And I just, she was trying to gauge kind of how I'm doing. And I told her I'm struggling, having a hard time, with the new job. Just, I'm not catching it. There's just so many steps and so many things to do. I'm having a hard time really catching it. And the people, the powers that be are super serious about rushing you to know the information so they can just throw you out there. And I really don't like that. I don't like just being thrown out there. I like to be prepared. So anyways, reached out and I was thinking I had to be real careful about what I said because, I didn't want to kind of reveal too much. But, I was, I kind of really feel isolated in a way because, and I might have brought this up in a previous vlog, and I'm sure I did. I just kind of feel real isolated. I think what I told her is, it's just, there's that feeling of being distant from everybody. I just kind of, it's just, every once in a while we'll say something, but really they're in their own little cliques and their own little, whatever. And, I'm just kind of there, just, not to say I'm trying to fit in, but I'm just, it's just one of those things where you just feel kind of isolated. So I keep to myself, stay in my little cubicle. Unfortunately, where I work at, my phone don't work in the office. There is no Wi-Fi. So, I can't use my phone. Can't do nothing like that. We're in the middle of government hiring freeze. So work is not a whole lot of it, which I'm not complaining about. But ever since I had to go back to the office, it's tough. When you're at home, teleworking, you don't have a whole lot of work, it's no big deal. You got Wi-Fi. You know what I'm saying? You can go clean dishes. You can go do something. Keep yourself occupied. Make the time go by faster. I'm a hands-on type of guy, so for me to sit, read manuals is not how I learn. I learn by doing it. That's how I learn. Maybe that's not a good thing, and maybe that's what's hindering me in this job, because this job requires a lot of reading. And so maybe that's what's hindering me, because there's a lot of regulations. Not everything is simple and to find. You got to search here, search there, and everywhere. So it's just a lot more difficult. So that's probably why I'm struggling. You don't want to be a disappointment, and you don't want to be left behind. And so that's kind of how I'm feeling. It's kind of testimony time after I talked about the Pope. And it's just, I'm just feeling kind of isolated and kind of down that, these other folk are catching on, and these other folks that are catching on faster came with the already trained, whereas, we're fighting to get training. And that the training is horrible. That our training is absolutely horrible. They go too fast, and they let you know right in front, this is just foundational. For the most part, you're not gonna get it from this class. And I'm like, well, why have the class then? Because it's kind of a waste of time. And it's just typical government convoluted nonsense. That's what it is. And they overcomplicate things, and they can't make it simple. Nothing is ever simple. Everything's overly complicated. It's just the way it is. And so just feeling a little isolated, feeling like I'm by myself, and it's not a good place to feel like, especially on a new job. You don't want to keep asking people, so they keep telling you ask questions, but after a while they're going to stop answering them, because they're going to see that you really are not getting it, and then they're just going to give up on you. And I'm not the type of person that likes to train like that, to just tell them once and then tell them to figure it out. And my trainers were taught that way. They were like, their trainer taught them one time, and then after that they're like, figure it out. If you did something wrong, figure it out. No, that's not the way I learn. I understand that is a way of training, and that is a way of learning, but that's not the way I learn. I understand that is a way, and some people do learn that way. Leave them to their own devices and they figure it out. And I understand that it does have merit. I'm not discounting that teaching style. I just don't learn that way. I don't learn from that teaching style. I learn by being repetitive, meaning getting my hands on it and doing it over and over again. That's how I learn. I'm not a great note taker, which is a disadvantage in this job as well. But once I start doing it and I keep doing it, then I'll get good at it. But people only know how to teach the way they know how to teach. And so it really can be difficult. And when you're doing the training, it's not hands-on training, you're watching somebody else do it. And the only chart class that I had that was hands-on was, our bread and butter HR program. But they were going so fast you couldn't even keep up. And that was the only hands-on training. The only hands-on training. The only hands-on training. And they were going way too fast. And I told them after I got off, I didn't learn a thing. They were going too fast. And now you're throwing me in there and having me try to figure out how to do this stuff, and I'm just totally lost. And it's frustrating. And that makes you even more isolated. So I guess this conversation went from talking about the passing of a pope to my testimony about isolation. So I guess that's the topic for today, is isolation. You know, just feeling isolated. And not only at work. I'm feeling isolated at church. Not only my local church, but the national church, my jurisdiction. Feeling like I'm the only one. Feeling like, you know, there's really nobody that can relate, which there really isn't. And nobody really wants to relate. I think that's the biggest thing, is nobody wants to relate. You know, they're just happy with their little group or their little, you know, whatever, and they don't want to you know, get to know me or find out anything about me or anything like that. So just feeling isolated, and it's not a great feeling. I don't like it. You know, like I said in previous vlogs, I didn't grow up that way. I was a social butterfly as a child. I never met a stranger. And then, you know, reality set in, adulthood set in, and life experiences set in, and now I'm almost the exact opposite. I mean, I'm not a hermit, and I love to talk, but, you know, I'm just not that same person anymore. And so when you know, you find somebody that likes to talk, I tend to talk their ear off because I have nobody to talk to. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of times I can't even talk to my spouse because she don't understand, or she thinks I'm complaining, which I'm really not. I'm just really trying to vent. I'm really trying to get somebody to understand me. So I just stop talking about a whole lot of things, even to my spouse. I just keep it in. I know that's not healthy, and I don't recommend that to nobody. You know, find you a spouse, you know, that you can really confide in and talk to, and they don't think you're, you know, being negative or complaining or all these other things. You know, that's not what I'm trying to do. Yeah, sometimes I do complain. I sure do. But that's not what I'm really trying to do. I'm just trying to find somebody to understand me. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find somebody to understand me. Just somebody to vent to. Maybe I'll feel better if you just let me talk. Maybe I'll feel better. So, you know, my former coworker, you know, was, I think, trying to be that. I guess I just really wasn't necessarily in the mood per se. You know, I wasn't in the mood, and, you know, it just, oh golly, I just didn't feel like, you know, it was the time. I guess I didn't feel like it was the time, and yeah, I don't know. But anyways, I did appreciate her reaching out, because most people don't. Most people don't care. You know, they you know, everybody, like I mentioned in my last vlog, everybody's in their little bubble. And I'm trying not to create a bubble for me. I'm really trying hard. I'm really trying to, you know, not be that. You know, I'm trying to be, you know, and that's why I do this. I think this helps. I think being able to talk and talk it out helps. Even if I don't always know what I want to talk about. Like today, I had no clue. I knew I wanted to talk about the passing of the Pope, but I didn't know what I was going to talk about afterwards, and I didn't want to have such a short vlog. It was kind of almost like a waste. But turns out, found me a little subject matter, and talk about it. But yeah, you don't want to be that isolated person. No man is an island, but sometimes it feels like you're on an island. No man's an island. You just got to find that person that's willing to willing to get you off that island or occupy that island with you. And basically the phrase mean no man is an island is no man's alone, no man by himself. However you want to do it. I don't know what this person's doing in front of me. They're being real slow here. But yeah, it's no man's an island, or no man should be an island for that matter. And obviously, if you're saved, then you're not an island. You've got God. But let's just be perfectly honest. We all need somebody. We all need somebody. We all need somebody. And even if you got a spouse, you still need a good friend. Because sometimes your spouse don't understand. Sometimes your spouse don't understand. I gotta get around this guy because this person's slow right here. But yeah, so you got to be able to talk to somebody. And like I said, sometimes it's not your spouse. Sometimes your spouse, as much as you love your spouse, sometimes they don't always understand everything you're going through. And so you need somebody else that you can talk to, that you can confide in. So isolation can be very dangerous when it comes to, people. Mentally and physically, especially mentally, isolation can really be harmful. That's why COVID did such damage. Because people were isolated. They had to stay home. They couldn't have, real conversation face to face. They couldn't see people and, all these other things that happened. And it really affected a lot of people. Especially children. And so we see the dangers of isolation just from COVID. We see the dangers of isolation from COVID. Whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. What came out of it wasn't that we were better. Not at all. In fact, most of the COVID stuff we knew was, not only was it created, but all the stuff they made us go through wasn't even necessary. Whether you believe it or not. And there are people to this day that still wear their mask even though COVID's over with, for the most part. Even though, like the flu, it'll come back in various strains and whatnot and all that. But people are, to this day, because they may have lost loved ones or whatever, they think that, COVID was the end all and be all. It was not. The flu still kills more than COVID ever will. The only reason COVID was as effective as it was, one, because people don't take care of themselves. We have an overweight population. People aren't taking multivitamins. They're not, building their immune systems, and they have underlying conditions. Almost everybody that passed away from COVID had underlying conditions. Period. Underlying conditions. Almost every last one of them had underlying conditions that passed away. Most people got COVID. It was a real hard flu. They got over it and moved on. I never got it. My wife did. My youngest son did. And I don't think my other two boys got it. But my wife and youngest son did. So even in that, isolation turned out to be bad. Yeah, when you isolate a disease or a bacteria or something like that, yeah, you need to isolate. Yeah, fires, you need to isolate them so they don't spread. Yes, in those instances, isolation is good. But when it comes to human beings, isolation is not good. We are social creatures. We are social creatures. And COVID is the perfect example of how isolation did not work. And in fact, made things worse. So do all you can to try to make sure that you're not in the bubble so much that you can't get out of it. That you're so isolated that nobody can talk to you or reach you, and you can't reach them or don't want to reach them. Because you get to a point in isolation where you don't want to talk to nobody. You don't want to speak to nobody. You don't want to do nothing. I think that isolation is a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing, and I don't want to be isolated. I don't like it. I like to be around people. You know what I'm saying? I want to be sociable. But sometimes people just don't want to be sociable back to you. So you can't force people to do something they don't want to do. You really can't. You can't force folk to speak to you. You can't force folk to fellowship with you. You can't force folk to do anything. So, I'm a proponent of being sociable and getting to know people and them getting to know you, and the old adage, people are a treasure box. All you got to do is open it. And that's so true. I think people have this, people don't think that people are worth knowing or talking with, but everybody's got something that's interesting about them. Everybody's got something interesting about them. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever it might be. Everybody's got something interesting. There's something in that treasure chest that you can connect with. Something. So I think we should do that. I think the more we connect with people and socialize with people, the better off we're going to be. I truly believe that. I truly believe communication is the key to all kinds of things. That can solve all kinds of stuff. Key is communication. Key is communication. Key is communication. So, it's important. So, anyways, I'm gonna leave it at that. Just give you a little breaking news, and we talked about some isolation today. Even if you're going through, remember, no man is an island, and somebody out there cares enough about you to listen. And you want to make sure that you're able to talk, because it's not healthy to hold it inside. So just remember that. If you like this content, please like, comment, subscribe, share it, please. I'd appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who does, who subscribes to me, and who is likes my videos, comment on my videos, watch my videos. I appreciate every one of you. I do. I appreciate every one of you. I think that you know, it says that, you know, you care enough to watch or even see a snippet, and you've taken of your time to do that. I appreciate it. So until next time, y'all, we will talk to you again. God bless you.